Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online recorded on Twitch, live Saturdays, 1500 Universal Time Zone. I am Matterall from Imperium News. Today on the show, we take a closer look at the Council of Stellar Management, better known as CSM. This elected body represents a player base in matters of development and direction. The makers of EVE Online consult them to develop the game. CSM's job is to give their opinion and to represent player sentiments. Each year, an election is held where dozens of players try to compete for one of 10 seats. They officially kick off their campaigns on the game's forums, but that quickly spreads to the metasphere, where candidates appear on shows like this one. Sometimes they write articles, and sometimes they campaign in population centers, spamming out vote for me or vote for that person. Voting begins in March and ends a few weeks later, and the winners are announced at FanFest, which is held in April. The voting system is complicated. A player fills out a ballot, picking his favorite candidates in order of preference. If the player's first pick gets enough votes to win a seat, the vote is not wasted by overvoting for him. Instead, the player's second vote is used. This ensures that every ballot has one vote that counts. Once elected, a CSM will hold a seat for 1 year. If the annual Alliance tournament were gladiatorial games for EVE, the CSM would be the Senate, the representatives of the people. In both cases, fame and recognition is awarded to the winners. News sites like this one, the Imperium News, also play a role by interviewing candidates or giving them a platform to communicate their expertise or vision for EVE. At best, the tournament, the election, and the press all feel like real-life simulations that parallel the real world. After the excitement of election fades, the real work begins. The candidates transition into representatives and communicate year-round with CCP, Crowd Control Productions, the makers of EVE Online, over chat channels. Twice a year, they travel to the headquarters of CCP in Iceland to meet for a few days. These face-to-face meetings are called summits. Those minutes from those meetings are released to the public, and this is a very good guide for players who want to predict what direction the game is going. And predicting mechanic changes in EVE is an essential part for market trading, for investing in the game, and for theory crafting. On today's show, we'll look into the CSM institution, explore the controversial history, and preview this year's election. Get your robes on, get your knives out. The Ides of March is near, and CSM 12 along with it. Welcome to the show, everyone. This year's election cycle has begun. Today, we have invited some experts to talk about CSM's history and current election cycle. Let's start with our good friend Tiberius. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Tiberius Stargazer, editor for EN24, editor-in-chief for EVNT, member of Northern Coalition in the Destructive Influence Corporation, and a long-time follower and slight skeptic of the CSM.
Slight skeptic.
Slight skeptic.
And today from CSM Watch, we have our guest Hoots.
Hi there, I am Hoots, and yes, I did a little thing called CSM Watch.
And you're also affiliated with Cap Stable, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the Cap Sable, the On Again and Currently Off Again podcast, absolutely.
Right. And unfortunately, Noisy Gamer is still trying to join us. He's having some issues with Discord. Discord can be kind of funny, so we'll hope to get him on before the show is over. But we're going to talk about CSM today, as I said. But first, we're going to do some headlines, and let's look at what's going on in EVE Online. The monthly economic report has come out, and actually this time it's caused some drama, hasn't it?
Oh, mama.
What happened there?
Well, the report itself didn't cause any drama, but Tiberius, did you want to take that?
So the monthly economic report is something that Eve has traditionally kind of put out beforehand. It was Professor, I can never pronounce his last name. He used to produce an economic report, and now it's CCP Quant and CCP and CCP produce this report every month, which gives you sort of an overall idea of what's going on in the Eve universe with regards to player production, player output, and things like that. And they contain lots of really pretty graphs, and they contain lots of really useful information and things like that. But it appears a bit of drama has blown up over this one because certain members within the CSM have raised concerns that the information that's being given out by CCP may be considered sensitive to certain player groups. And as a result, it's caused quite a lot of drama, particularly amongst marketeers and nullsec groups and people that aren't nullsec groups. I think that pretty much covers the situation, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. That just about covers it. And oh boy, when you tell people that you have data and you're going to take that data away, people get mad.
Well,
People
especially
get really
Walkfox,
mad.
who has an economic show, right? And so that's part of his reporting is telling you what's going on in those areas. And so um, it seems like for him, that's a big chunk of his show to show the differences in regions and stuff like that. And so if you're not going to report that, then that's, for him, that's a huge loss. But from the other side of it, the controversy is CCP in the pocket of Goonswarm because Goonswarm wants to cover up their economic activity because
But
from the economic activity you can back into knowing how much supers production is happening, which are these super capital ships that take a lot of resources to get produced. If you can figure out how much of that's going on, you can predict the power projection for that group. But
but I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether who. Well, I mean, it hasn't actually been confirmed which group had done. I mean, the finger's being pointed at Goons, obviously, because it was certainly in the last month's report. It was very easily highlighted that they are producing a lot of stuff in Delve, but not exporting any of it. Like none of it's leaving, so it's all being built and made and kept in that region. Whether it was them that sort of maybe said, yeah, we need this done or what, nobody really knows for sure because that information is not public. But I think it's a complete nonsense that anybody would actually turn around and request this information not to be given out, because you could just put a spy within a group, or you could sit there with a blue friendly, go to that region, look at the system hub information, find all the Soyotos that are currently producing stuff, and look at the industrial indexes for each system, and you'll immediately be able to tell whether they're building supers and titans or not. It's very, very easy to work that out. You don't need.
So is it free intel that CCP is giving out to everyone? Just another case of
It
free
just
intel.
makes it a lot. It just makes it easier for people to find that information out. It's not exactly difficult to find it if people really wanted to find it out. It just,
Yeah.
in this case, CCP were giving it out in a pretty graph way rather than just, this abstract sort of, hey, they got a Soto building stuff.
And the funny thing is that it leads to CSM as well. We'll cover more headlines before we go on, but I do want to drop this little CSM tidbit in there that apparently this happened with kind of a light discussion. It wasn't really focused on. But when the announcement was made that we're taking away this economic data, CCP Quant cited that CSM had basically approved it or asked for it, which may have caused the people to say, "Oh, that's the Goonswarm representatives getting their way using CSM as a weapon inside the game as a strategic advantage," and people went nuts. And this has happened before when there was just kind of an off-the-cuff conversation about jump bridges, and this would have been CSM 5, and it was this was headed. I think the chairwoman was Minxie. And it seemed to be a casual conversation about removing jump bridges from nullsec. And people were like, "Yeah, take them away. They're an unfair advantage kind of thing." But none of the people that were saying that were from nullsec, and they love their jump bridges. And so that created a huge problem that galvanized nullsec into participating in CSM. And so the very next year, you had full blocks and tickets running for uh, meaning every block had their ticket of who they were going to try to put forth on this committee so that that didn't happen again. And the next election was CSM 6, and that was headed up by Matani, who kind of basically took over the thing as chairperson. And that caused a lot of problems with HiSec people who are like, oh my God, NullSec has just taken over this whole institution because they could and to protect their own interests. And that's been
And
the
it's,
whole, that's been that
yeah,
way for a while now, right? That feeling of NullSec. This last one was very
yeah, and
NullSec driven.
it's definitely, and this has just blown that argument up all over again. It's like, I mean, a lot of the people on the CSM at the moment are mostly perceived as being nullsec candidates. There's a couple of exceptions to the rule that you could probably argue, like people like Nash, for example, has no interest in nullsec politics. He's just interested in tournaments and player meets. But there's certainly always that argument that's kind of floating around that, you know, CSM is always unfairly stacked towards the nullsec groups.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think that's where that started. Yeah, we'll get back to CSM in just a minute, but a few more things that are happening in EVE Online right now. The Guardians Galas NPC content that's happening. Anyone know about that?
Um, it's there's a nice little lore event going on around it to do with a player faction that holding this so the Angel and Serpentis holding their own little event. Very similar to the Blood Raider event, you'll have things spawning around all over the place where you can go and run them. They'll be in high sec, low sec, null sec, and the particular rewards for this one, the reward specific for this event, is that there will be ships identifiable by their unique skins that are hauling drugs. So you can shoot them and grab drugs out of them. If there are anything special about these drugs, I don't know. I guess we'll find out a little bit more. But they also drop some very, very pretty skins for the Galente ships as well, which I think everybody or anybody that's a Galente fan is very, very happy about as well.
Yeah, so this very much is content for people to play, not on their own, but away from PvP. This is NPC stuff, and it seems like they're going to have seasonal themes now. It's pretty established because this stuff is starting to cycling back. The next, this is the second year this has happened.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, seem to have something every 3 or 4 months or so now, and this is now they had the Blood Raider one for the last one, and now they got this one for the spring, so winter and springtime.
Hi, Noisy Gamer. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Discord is hard.
Noisy Gamer runs a blog. Let me just do an introduction real quick that focuses on a great many things. He's an amazing researcher, and he's joining us today to talk about the CSM. And now his Discord works. So we're just going through the headlines, and then we'll continue on and talk about CSM starting in just a minute. Another thing that just came up is the 07 show is tomorrow at 2000 UTC. Don't miss that. FanFest. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Tiberius, are you still featured on that?
No, I'm not. But EVNT does have a thing immediately after the 07 show this week, and there are some announcements within that relate to some of the stuff that we've been doing as well. So, kind of, I guess, is the answer to your question.
Yeah,
but not
by
really.
extension, yeah, I'll count it. You used to actually introduce the fights that would happen and stuff. I think you asked me if I would fight Bobmon on air, and I chickened out and said, no, I don't want to fight him on air because it was kind of a sensitive time.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to do it, but you know what? Getting EVE celebrities to log on at a particular time is harder than getting anybody else to log on at any particular time. So, yeah, it quickly went by the wayside after we sort of managed to get a few people together, and then we did one where a whole bunch of people dropped out last minute, and we had 2 or 3 days left to record it, and we ended up not being able to do it anymore after that, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, herding cats is hard.
Oh, it's so hard. It seems like we're, and Hoots, you might know something about this. It's easy to put together these programs that happen, that player volunteer programs like this and like CSM Watch. but nobody realizes how much work it takes and how you're so dependent on people showing up and stuff like that.
Oh, 100%, absolutely.
Not to say feel sorry for us, but it's it's not easy to do this stuff. Otherwise, everybody would do it. So the other thing that is happening is FanFest player hosts. If you want to be a player host at FanFest for the '07 show when it runs live, now is the time to apply. Just write to Eve TV at CCP. And if I would actually want to do this if I was going to FanFest, but actually there might be a chance that I go to FanFest this year. I don't know.
Come
Maybe a
to
little
FanFest this year.
little
You
wiggle
will
room.
come to FanFest this year.
We can hang out. Last
Totally.
bit of last bit of news is Brave is moving back to Catch, essentially back to Hero Coalition because they're going to join Test, well, along with CO2 now, in that area, and they're going to all looks like they're going to be friendly towards each other and help protect each other as they grow. So good for Brave. They're going back to Catch after all these months, many months.
Yep, I used to live with Brave in G, Tech 8 and Catch when we were out there, and during its heyday when it
I
was the largest corp. And so did Hoots, actually, as
I
well.
was gonna say it, both of us at the same time. Yeah,
Yep.
that brings back, memories. I'm trying to think of if I have any assets in the region that I need to get out and if I should put an alt in Brave.
But I mean, it was a great time for Brave actually then, and it was a great time I think for Eve as well, as a whole, because it's just, hey,
Wrote a
what
lot
are
of
we going to do
articles
today,
then.
guys?
Yeah.
Well, it got me into writing just because it got me into the nullsec politics. Because beforehand I was just like in low sec, just derping around, shooting people in faction warfare complexes, and I never really got involved in the meta stuff. And then it was like, oh my god, I'm like new kids on the block, go and
What's
join them,
this?
see what that's all about.
Yeah.
And it just opened my eyes, and I started writing, and here we are, like nearly 3 years later, still doing it,
Yeah.
still into the meta.
What's that expression?
Um,
Bob's your uncle.
Yep.
Like how did you end up there? That's well, we're glad you did because you're a great writer. You put a lot of CSM stuff together,
Oh, stop
actually.
it! You're embarrassing me.
No, it's true.
um,
Take the
but yeah, I
compliment.
mean, yeah, like this time of year, one of the busiest times of the year for me is with the CSM stuff. So it's pretty good. It's
Yeah.
pretty good.
Well, let's move into talking about CSM, and I think we'll start with some of the basics. Let's see. Any of you guys, I think either one, everybody here is so qualified to talk about this, so I won't take up much time. What can you tell us about like the basics of CSM?
Who's
And
go?
dead air.
Right, absolutely. I think in your notes here, it was founded or came out of, and I'm gosh, I had this branded into like my brain at one point. But what was that scandal? T20
Yep.
was the big scandal. That was sort of in some way the catalyst
Well,
for the creation of CSM.
let's back that up just a second. We'll talk about T20 second because it is kind of interesting in the formation of it. But
Yeah.
the what was happening in Eve was that they had, and this has always been the tradition of Eve. It turns out I didn't realize this, but even I believe Hilmar was kind of a fan of the game before he actually was called to engineer it. So when CCP started the game, they had realized quickly that there were fans of the game, Eve, that were so into it that they knew more than the engineers building it. So they started hiring these guys locally from Iceland, and so that began the tradition of plucking people out who were very smart about this genre. And early on in Eve, a lot of the players knew a lot about the mechanics and were giving feedback to CCP. So CCP would seek them out. So they would seek out people like Caleb, like Kriba, and these kinds of very advanced players that had figured out a lot of stuff to kind of to throw things at them and say, if we did this, what do you think would happen? If we turned this knob, what do you think would happen? And it was a way of helping themselves guide the game. And yeah, so So basically, that tradition of kind of approaching their player base for advice on how to proceed started way back long before CSM started. But by 2008, they had decided they wanted to formalize this, and that came after what was called the T20 incident. And I think Nosy, do you know about the T20 or?
I know a little bit about the T20. Basically, there were developers, and they were in the Band of Brothers. And T20 was a developer, and he was at the time they had
So that was
uh,
his name. T20 was his CCP T20.
CCP was his T20,
No,
and
yeah.
so what happened is that he would spawn blueprint original T2 blueprint original blueprints for Band of Brothers. And if you hear like some of the old timers joke about like saber about their sabers, apparently one of the blueprints was a saber BPO. They're uh, they're rare now, but back then you'd have to. There was a lottery in order to get them, and so you had to do something in game, and then you could get into a lottery, then you could win them. And instead of having to go through the lottery, T20 would just spawn them and hand them out.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's pretty much. Go ahead, Tyrese.
Yeah, no, I was just agreeing. Wasn't like cutting in for a conversation or anything.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that what I read, and it's funny, somebody did a thesis, their college thesis on CSM. That's how interesting and intricate the stuff is that people can actually write university thesis on the game and specifically for CSM. That the guy needed to get rid of his stuff. CCP was saying, "Get rid of your stuff. You can't have your stuff. We have to like professionalize because the developers would actually play as players secretly." Um, and
They still do.
yeah, they still do. And they basically said you have to divest. You can't be a part of a power structure like that because then it looks like you're helping your power structure. So he divested, but he left all his stuff to Bob, and that was a no-no. And that happened in 2006. So it was discovered much later by a guy named Kugutsumin, uh, who wrote an article called Reikoku Makes Its Own Luck, because that's where he was from, that corporation. And that article was explosive and basically told everybody that wasn't Bob, look, these guys are powerful in the game, but look why they have help from CCP who's creating stuff out of thin air for them. Wasn't exactly true in that way, but it definitely Hilmar stepped forward and said, it doesn't matter if it's true or not that we're corrupt. If we look corrupt, people aren't going to have faith in us. So this has got to stop. And what we'll do is we'll build this organization to help transparency between the company and the players. And that institution was CSM. So they coupled two things. One was the need to have better public relations with the players, to have better transparency. The second thing was they needed to kind of formalize their avenues to talk to players that were very experienced in the game. And the third thing was there was nothing like it in video games, so it was a nice public relations move. So those are the three elements that brought forth CSM, and that's why we have this elected body uh, that happens now.
Yep.
Kugu went on to have forums that were influential because he was basically banned from CCP for creating all this problem. And Kugu forums were like the original, what you would call Reddit now, where everybody goes to dump all their trash. I wouldn't call it the original. The forums were that first, but CCP clamped down on that and pushed it out to some third-party area, and Kugutsumin had that forum, and so that's where everybody put all their stuff. But as forums kind of went and lost favor with the world, people don't use forums like they used to. Most people now, evolved over to Reddit, and that's kind of where you see that tradition coming back. So that's been around for 10 years or more.
Yep.
It's kind of nuts. There's so many parallels. I think people look at CSM and look at Reddit, and they look at the way players react to, hey, CCP is cheating for the goons, and like all this stuff has happened before. This is not new.
All this has happened before, and all this will
Right.
happen
Where have I
again.
heard that?
Oh, Battlestar Galactica reference. There we go.
Right. So some of the I'll continue along the basics here. Some of the important things about the CSM is like for a long time, people have said, "Bah, it's just a popularity contest. It's a pageant. These are just the popular kids getting elected to office." And that may be true, but what is also true is it is a powerful place where you can have influence in the game. Look at what happened with Incarna, which was an expansion that went bad because, well, there wasn't much delivered, and it was moving the game in a completely different direction than, or it started moving the game forward in a certain direction where everybody was a person, not a ship, and people were really rebellious against that. And so the CSM had an emergency meeting with CCP, and they said, you know what, fix the game. We have all these broken pieces of the game, and so you just need to fix the game, and that's what you should do. And
That
um,
was the next expansion.
right, the next two expansions, or three actually, were all about fixing parts of the games that people were actually playing, not about going into new territory, which was kind of sad for people who wanted to walk around a station and have a corporal life.
People still do. The walking in station thread is still very active, and there's into the many thousands of replies now. Like, when's it going to come back?
People want it back.
Yeah, totally. There's like a core group that want it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see that coming back unless
No, I don't
they
either.
unless they change uh the 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 walking in closet piece to be run by Unreal 4 engine like is in Valkyrie and all the other games that they're doing in VR. Then if they can do that, then you could maybe see it. But that I don't know if they have that much work to do.
The important thing is also to remember about the CSM as well. It's a lot of people have this really weird misconception that it's some sort of junior developer job. It's not. It's like not a junior developer job at all. It's just a community relations PR role, basically, like any other, I guess, any politician really. You go to represent the player's opinion based on what CCP is currently developing and working on at that moment in time. If you go there and go, I want to change nullsec, and they're not changing nullsec that year, then, well, tough. You've got to find something else to talk about. I find a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions of it. They go on their platforms, I am going to go and change this. Well, you're not going to go and change it unless CCP are actually developing or working on that. So you go, CCP present what they're working on. You go to sort of, from your own experience and knowledge of working with the community, to gauge what the response will be and use your own knowledge and information about the game mechanics to see where there may be potential problems. And that's it. That's the CSM role. It is a really good opportunity if you are looking to do certain things, because it creates such great contacts. Like you can go there and you can say, hey, I'm this person, look at me, I have these ideas, and I can form these things, which will probably develop great relationships going forward in the future. But
Because
if
people love it when you tell them what to do in their job.
yeah, exactly. But if you go and sit there and throw, a document on the desk and go, I want this done by the end of the year, they're going to look at you and go, well, no, because we have all these other things we need to do, and we can't work on that yet because it doesn't fit in with some of the other plans and developments that we're doing.
Well, that's been a big problem. A part of the controversial nature of CSM is that they have no power, and people don't. Some departments didn't even meet with them, or met with them and gave them just a little bit of FaceTime, but didn't really take in any of the suggestions. And different devs reacted differently to the CSM. Like it's part of the history, right?
I mean, really, do you really want them to have all that power? I mean, people don't trust them with the limited power, which is like almost none that they have now. I mean, I don't think if they actually did have that kind of power, I don't think anybody would be happy.
No,
Well,
and even then, it would just further the idea that, particularly like if you look at some of the accusations about what agendas people are furthering, it would just go, oh, you're furthering the agenda of the nullsec blocks or whatever block that generally gets elected in that time of year. So,
Hoots?
I do think it's a little bit of a misconception that the CSM has no power. I think it would be better phrased, and this is going down into the deep end of like social contract and political philosophy. CSM has, I guess you could say, informal power, right? And it only has as
Yeah,
much power as like the player base like supports it, right? So if the player base doesn't support CSM or like doesn't care about what CSM is doing, CSM has less influence with CCP. And then similarly, I think on the other end, like CSM can derive influence by the types of relationships it develops with CCP and different members and uh, different CSMs do that in different ways, and kind of their influence kind of is demonstrated kind of accordingly year to year based on the relationship the body and the individuals have with CCP, be it a friendly relationship or in some years like an openly hostile relationship.
Yeah.
yeah, and the year before the current season is a good example of a really hostile CSM. Like we never really heard what the details were, but there were some rumors going around of just literally everybody shutting it down
I
and just
think it
not
was
talking to the CSM.
I think in retrospect, it was grading personality differences. It wasn't anything specific to point at. It was exploded, yes, by scandal. And maybe we can talk about scandals in their history. CSM, we'll come back to what was explosive about the last one. But starting out a long time ago, there was somebody that was booted off the CSM. I think her name was Ankh. She was a big faction war person and also was part of CVA or the Pravi block. Worked for a gaming company, and so there was some problems with information ending up with or I don't actually know the details of that, but she was kicked for violating NDA or maybe encouraged to leave. So already you had a problem of leaking information from this group.
Yeah,
Then
I
do
think I think in that case
Mhm.
that it was actually she used the information in order to make some profit on the market.
It wasn't because she worked for a gaming company.
No, it was the first person that got kicked off was because they had they had the information in front of them,
Mhm.
and it was like they just couldn't resist, and so they just made a killing on the market. And they found out, IA found out, and said goodbye.
Yeah. Well, do you know who that was? That wasn't Ankh, was it?
I have to go back and look, but I think it
Yeah,
was
this
because I
is.
think she was the first one that got kicked off.
Oh, was she? Okay. So we're talking like 10 years ago. So it's hard to remember these things. But um, that was the first scandal, I guess. There was a few others. The biggest one was that after Nullsec kind of took over CSM, the Matani made some disparaging remarks at the Alliance panel, which is known for being rowdy and controversial and stuff like that. For comments that he later apologized for profusely, but the damage was done because he did it, in front of everybody on a live stream, and he was up for re-election, I believe, and so people howled. So he didn't lose his position because he was finishing out his session, but he was not allowed to run for the next year, and that was probably the biggest thing that had happened. And
And
then,
that actually leads into why we have a single transferable vote.
oh, really?
Is they had just announced the results of the CSM 7 elections. The Matani had received over 10,000 votes. It was the most votes anybody had ever gotten by like double. And so he did that. Nobody made a big deal about it for 3 or 4 days. Then the media shitstorm happened, and he was removed. And then there was this big outcry. How could you disenfranchise 10,000 people that voted for the Matani?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, actually, and it's suspected, I think it's accused by Matani that it was EN24 and MMORPG .com or something, one of those sites. I don't know. There's a news site, I forget what it's called, that both those institutions targeted Matani and started blowing this thing up. So if people had seen the remarks, it had gone by, there's no controversy. But days later, it was discovered by rivals in the media business, and they're the ones that made it into a big issue, and the frenzy started after that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
if you go back and well, you can't go back and look. They took the video down, but the Matani made two mistakes. One, he tried to keep drinking with DNS Black, and you just don't do that with the Promo Marine. Okay, just don't do that. It's just a bad idea.
Can also attest drinking with DNS Black is a bad idea.
Keeping up with him in general.
Yeah, totally.
Right. So that was the first one, and doing it on stage, right? And then the second problem is that the CSM coordinator, Xhagen, I think you pronounce his name.
Mhm.
The Matani almost got through the session without saying anything really, really bad. But it was like, and so Xhagen tried to like cut off the questioning and end the session before the Matani said anything bad. But then somebody kept on asking questions, and then the Matani said his infamous statement, and then that's when it blew up. So he was really, really close from getting away from that whole thing without without like putting his foot in his mouth.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. It got so close, and yeah, couldn't resist that last moment. And this, in the spirit of things, you're supposed to be controversial. That's the whole idea of the place, is to be edgy and controversial and stuff like that. But later, he made a pretty amazing apology, which I always noted, even when I wasn't working for INN and all that. That he kind of he gave all his wealth to the guy that he disparaged, and really said some stuff that seemed very meaningful. So I thought that was interesting. What did you think, Tiberius?
I mean, it's old history now, really. But my main
He probably doesn't appreciate us talking about it, by the way.
probably not.
Wants to get that behind him.
Because it always keeps coming up. It comes up every single time, and it's always like something that gets thrown up. But this is the thing that really puts me. This is the sort of stuff that really puts me on a spot when it comes to being a bit of a skeptic about the CSM. It's just the amount of drama it can generate. Like last year, up until sort of last week, was pretty much drama free. Like there was nothing at all, and it was great, and it was glorious, and it seemed really productive. And from the minutes and the notes and generally what people were saying, it just felt like a great thing. But when you get drama that rears its ugly head, and we're Eve nerds, we all love our drama. I mean, holy cow, we love our drama.
All about the story.
Yeah, exactly. And we love creating drama and being part of drama because, it drives most of this game. Like the alliances and things don't fight each other over nothing. It's usually because drama is being created somewhere along the lines. But when you have that and you have this sort of thing and it creates such massive divisions, I always bring into question how productive is the CSM when it has this sort of stuff happening all the time on it. And because all it serves is to create divisions between CCP and the CSM, and CSM's meant to be the trusted partner.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that always gets me about
that's
it.
where we were headed with this, is the so there was certain things that caused problems and controversy in the past. The next thing that happened was just once Matani was gone from CSM, he was replaced by Scion, who was like his diplomatic lieutenant. And there was a sense of them taking up all the oxygen in the room. Scion he was a very intelligent guy, so he'd talk about issues, but it was kind of like their issues, and it was just constant. And people got aggravated, and over time there was kind of there was a split between factions, basically, and different people aligned with different people. And it was just an uncomfortable situation for about 3 years. Some say it was a management problem. And then and then there was a leak by Manfred Sidious, who is a longtime PL theory crafter and FC, been around a long time. But when that information came out about what these massive changes, not just small changes, but these massive changes to super capital ships that would be game changing, were going to come out, and they had leaked. There was a lot of pitchforks and fire torches, people marching to say, like, CSM is like ruining the game, that sort of thing. So a lot of controversy, a lot of grating personalities that led to a lot of kind of bitterness. It exploded with the leaks of super capital information coming out. And that leads us to this last year, which was like this nirvana of no drama, nobody um, having access to grind with one another. It seemed very cooperative. CCP changed their leadership on their end. CCP executive producer became involved. A lot of weight came to the CSM as far as importance and professionalism.
Mhm.
And everybody thought it was a great year until the very end. And then all of a sudden, this controversy, and we'll get to that in a second because we want to. Well, we could talk about it now because we're going to go into candidates, I guess, after this. But um, what are some of the things that are happening right now? There's a few things actually. One was not reporting that economic data seemed like it was CCP capitulating to um, Goon Swarm and the Imperium by hiding their profits. Um, and that was an interesting thing because it might have been more of a casual thing. It wasn't anything voted on or anything like that. But the second thing is there was a candidate who's popular on YouTube. And well, he threw his hat in the ring. He said, I'm going to be a candidate. And he's not necessarily known as a great PvPer, but he does these really funny and videos and has a lot of popularity. And somebody who's on CSM, an incumbent, came out and said, "Don't elect this guy because he's funny. He doesn't know anything about the mechanics. He's going to be another worthless CSM candidate, an empty vessel that is very good at marketing himself but doesn't really know the game." And compared him to a previous CSM member named Chance Ravine, who's in charge of Bomber's Bar. I think is it not Bomber's Bar? It's
No. Torpedo
Wingspan.
Wingspan.
thank
There we go.
you. Thanks. Wingspan. And so then he entered the fray and said, "Hey, I wasn't useless." um, so it created this big, you know, uh, saloon brawl that's going on right now. And it was because he was trying to say, like, you have a really good candidate, and this is a Mr. Hyde who said this is a PvPer who also does YouTube stuff, but he has a lot of substance to it, and you can tell he knows what he's talking about because of even just the summary videos at the end of the summit. You could tell that he was articulating a lot of the balance issues that they're facing and stuff like that. And he's throwing his support to another candidate named Sutonia.
Mhm.
Um, and so by doing that, though, he's totally disparaging to other people who take issue with that. So that's what that's about.
And you know what? I know both of them, and I
Mhm.
work with both of them at EVNT. And
Who is both of them?
Reload and Satonia.
Okay, Reload's the guy that makes the videos that are funny.
Yep.
Okay.
But despite the satirical nature of his videos, Reload's videos, there is actually some useful information in those. Admittedly, and those two, Satonia and Reload, do a lot of the tournament stuff together. And when they do the commentary and after show analysis results, and I see the conversations between them as well. So I see a completely different side of it than just like the marketing side of it. I mean, okay, Sutonia is on a completely different level altogether.
Meaning more experienced.
Yeah, but he can write a 10,000 word document on how to fly a Kestrel, for God's sake. That's the level of depth of knowledge he has. But Reload's not far behind him. So I'm sitting. When that came out, I was sat there and I was looking at it and going, "Where has this come from?" I know he's got very popular with his videos, and they are a bit satirical and they are kind of funny, and but you look behind that a little bit. There is actually some interesting little theory crafting stuff that goes on in there, and that's why they're so popular.
So you
Not
think
just funny; they actually contain some useful information.
right? And so you think it's a little unfair.
Totally. I thought it was totally unfair. I also think, though, however, the reaction of the wider community to be sending in death threats and things like that is even worse. So please stop that.
Noisy, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think that there's something personal between Reload and Mr. Hyde, and I think it goes way before this because, like, Reload made his CSM video, where he was announcing and then went through all the CSM members, and he took a couple shots at Mr. Hyde. Well, he took shots at everybody.
Yeah.
But I think Mr. Hyde may not have that big of a sense of humor, and so, which is like really weird because like CCP Guard and a bunch of the other, like CCP Carker and a bunch of the other devs out there seem to have a sense of humor, and so I don't think that they're going to be offended by Rehold. So, but Mr. Hyde, he seems like a tryhard that like really is seriously, and this is serious internet spaceship business, and you can't make fun of it.
I will say it's unusual for a CSM incumbent to actively disparage like a former member of CSM and then B a candidate for CSM. So take that for what
Mm.
it's worth.
Yeah, you haven't seen that, have you, in your experience covering CSM?
I mean, you do see it, but it's still not usual at the very least. That even throughout all of CSM 9 and CSM 10, there was a lot of like passive aggressive treatment from CSM members to other CSM members, but I don't think I ever saw someone in a forum post call another CSM member like completely
Yeah.
useless.
Actually, it was like the second post. Like you had the initial post of, "Hey, I'm running for CSM," and the very next post was, "Don't vote for this guy."
Right, exactly. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that, which is I think what makes this I mean, this drama, it's not really important, I don't think. It's not anything that's gonna shatter the institution of CSM. It's not anything that really reflects on the whole body. It's just a fight slap fest
Yeah.
between a
Mm.
bunch of people, and
Between a bunch of nerds.
Exactly, and it's entertaining to watch, and Reddit has made, like, some pretty great memes about it, and it's fantastic. I will say a little bit under the radar, maybe because of this drama and the economic data, I'd be more concerned, just as an observer, about the little news item. And Nosy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this was either last week or 2 weeks ago. They're changing the number of seats on CSM.
Yes, they are.
Previously, you had 12 seats, and then before that, and kind of the number of seats has varied, and the actual terms have varied throughout the length of the CSM.
Yeah,
Currently,
it
it's
started
1
with 9,
terms.
by the way.
Yep.
Right, it started with 9, yeah.
Yep, and then at some point it was, with the latest CSM, it was up to 12, and now they're reducing that number back down to 10, and that
Well, I think it went up to
especially
14, by the way.
I
Yeah,
think it might
I
have,
think
yeah, at
up
some
to
point.
yeah,
14.
it went up to 14. I mean, at one point it was either 7 permanent with 7 alternatives. Then you went up to 14 with this STV being able to provide alternatives if somebody couldn't serve, and now it's going back down to 10.
It sounds like CSM of the old, like the first one.
For people that are
But
concerned about null-sec representation and fair representation on the CSM,
mm.
I don't know how I feel about the reduction of seats or
Well,
the logic behind it.
it's funny because some people I've talked to, insiders say that the reason that they said 10 was fine was because they were afraid of nullsec dominance. So this was something that was used to convince them that this would be the right thing to do. It was debated. There were people who disagreed with this decision, probably because they were going to rerun as incumbents, right? And that's just now it's no longer. I mean, now they have to compete with other incumbents for the same seat. But yeah, it was interesting because I thought it would be the other way around, Hoots. I thought it was like, well, wait a minute. If you only have 10 seats, now nullsec gets them all instead of
Right,
having.
that's my, or maybe STV prevents that. I'm not certain. But I'm real curious to see how
Yeah,
that plays out.
yeah,
STV is the voting system, right?
That is
Yep.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
yeah. That's the single transferable vote. If the candidate that your first choice is, if he can't win, then your second choice is put in, or if your first choice wins, then a fraction of your vote goes towards your second choice. It's kind of I call it the put you know I say that system was put together because people like the Mittani and the Goon Swarm Cabal were spending too much time trying to get their people onto CSM. And so they said, heck with this. We're going to give you a system. Just make a link and tell your people to vote A, B, C, D, and then they'll get on. And then that way you can do more important things like mining in a work role in Delve.
Yeah. Well, so as that's happening, they've reduced it to 10, and it's made a lot of the incumbents nervous because a lot of them are rerunning this time, which is kind of funny because normally CSM is so demanding it burns people out of the
11?
game. It also ruins the game. Yeah, at least I think a good quarter or a third of them are running, which is more than usual. Last time there
Yeah,
was
about a
only
third. Yeah.
one or two or three that stuck around out of 14. But the problem with CSM, and maybe one of the reasons I would never run for it, is it ruins. I would think it would ruin your game knowing what's coming in advance. It's like having spoilers, and then it makes you
What did
second guess.
what did Celine say the other week about it? It's it's all fine eating the sausage, but seeing how it's made is a different story.
And that's another thing. You get to see how this game's put together, and that may not be the best thing. You never want to meet your heroes in it, because it will ruin your ruin your relationship to them. You also don't want to know what's coming down the road because now not only do you not get it as a gift when it does arrive because you already knew about it, but you also have to question your own investment in the game and path that you're doing. And does this look unlawful if I buy a bunch of this mineral and I know this mineral change is coming? So I think it kind of disenchants them from the game, but not this year. We have a huge number coming back
Yeah,
and saying they're going to run again for less seats, which makes it
yeah.
dramatic for them.
But I think that's probably more of an indication of how successful last year was in terms of its cooperative nature, that so many more are willing to rerun again. There's still a good chunk of them that aren't, but there are a bunch of people that you wouldn't normally expect to run that are going again. So
Well, and so for example, the carryover between CSM 9 and CSM 10, there were quite a few incumbents that ran again for CSM 10. And then it was after CSM 10, you saw virtually, I think, no incumbents with the exception of maybe
Yep.
Fuzzy Steve Ronokin.
Yeah, we'll
good
get
old
to candidates
Steve.
in a second. We'll get to.
Oh,
I'll
you know
argue,
what?
I'll debate you with that, but we'll get to candidates in a second. No, it's good, but I did want to say this one last thing because it involves you both, Nosy Gamer and Hoots. You guys are part of CSM Watch. And this really strange thing happened that the current CSM said, we're not going to do any interviews with Cap Stable. Let me just give you a little context. Cap Stable does this section of their podcast called CSM Watch that used to do interviews with all the candidates, or as many as they could get. And then they would do every 5 or 6 candidates. I should let you tell this, but you would have a little roundtable where you would describe the interviews and how well they went and what were good points and bad points. And you guys would add more context and more analysis into it. Um, but the CSM incumbent said, "Yeah, we're not doing that again because you guys were biased." Do you have anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I guess we aren't, unfortunately, just due to scheduling and due to kind of where I'm at and where Lantheris is at in his life. We're not doing interviews this year, so that's one thing.
How
I
many years
guess.
did you do it before?
Oh gosh, it was either 3
I
or
want to say
4.
3.
You guys
Right.
did 3 because
That's right.
I hopped in on the second year.
Yep, that's correct.
And
So we
this
did
was
them for 3
pioneered, we
years.
should say, by Crossing Zebra's founder Xander
Yeah, it
Afina.
was
Mm-hmm.
Xander was more or less kind of there was a 1 or 2 man army that churned out a whole bunch of interviews the first time, and then the second year after that, that would have been with CSM 8. He decided to run for CSM. And then decided because he was running for CSM, he wasn't going to do the interviews the second year in the row, and kind of Lantheris and Stupid Genius at the time, and myself kind of looked at one another and were like, "Well, we could do interviews, right? How hard could it be?" And that's
Famous
yeah,
last words.
absolutely. And the 3 years later, it turned into CSM Watch, and Lantheris really kind of took that and ran with it up until kind of he went to grad school, and our lives really shifted for a little bit. But I guess I haven't personally spoken with any of the CSM incumbents this year. It's unfortunate that they feel that the actual interviews were biased. I always, just at least for myself.
Well, just to clarify that
Go
one
ahead.
slightly, because I know a few of the incumbents, they loved the interviews. The interviews were great. They liked the mix of really tough questions that were probing into their background, and they loved the fact that, oh my God, where the hell did you find that out? I think one of the CSM was questioned on, oh yeah, you went to Reykjavik when you were like such age, and there's a picture of you drunk when you were underage and drinking. Do you have any comments about that? And it was like, how did you find that out? It's
So
it was that sort of
funny,
stuff,
yeah,
and they
there
loved
was some
that. They
interesting
loved that.
that question. I remember there was some debate how to approach asking that question, or if it should even be brought up at all. And kind of my take was, well, yeah, it's out here. You on it's just it was real simple to find, like the forum posts and just all the information. It's right here, just a little Google
Yep,
search.
yep, yep, yep.
And so certainly it's on the table. I don't think you should like. I think it was General Stargazer that did that particular
Yeah, he
interview.
did.
And I remember just saying, you don't need to be confrontational about it. The question, just get in, ask the question, say, what was this about? And just see what the answer is. And that's always that been in the interviews how I wanted to
Mm.
approach them is you
And
just ask the question and see
and
what
they
the
loved
answer
it.
is.
They
Yeah.
loved it. Like that
So
side of it. It was the analysis shows that I think the guys universally, the CSM people universally disliked.
I think that it is, I've said this on the analysis shows themselves. It is really, really super easy to be a talking head on an analysis show and pick apart an interview, right? That doesn't take much talent, and
No, but
it's
you guys also gave glowing reviews. I mean, you essentially
you
made the
know,
career
we
of
did.
Kyle
Um
from SMA.
I do think so there was and there always has been internal um I guess discussions and not necessarily like a unified agreement among the members of Cap Stable. Initially, like the second year, we were kind of debating: do we even want to do analysis shows, or do we just want to kind of have the interviews stand on their own? And uh,
It
I I think there's merit in having the interviews stand just on their own as kind of a resource. And that was always kind of the most important thing for me. The analysis shows were just kind of something we did because we're a bunch of nerds and really like
I
talking
think it's
about this.
fun, and I don't think I criticized them myself at the time and said that, oh, it's king making, where you get to pick winners and you use your influence and
Gosh,
stuff.
I hope not.
Yeah, and
And
go ahead.
I never really ever thought of myself, I think, as an influencer in that way. Maybe that's a little bit naive. But
I,
it was just we did it mostly because it was fun to do.
yeah, well, I think people would. Noisy, do you want to say something about this? You were involved in these meetings.
Yeah, I think the analysis shows were okay when we actually had people who had a differing views on the candidates.
Yes.
So we could go ahead and say, well, this person's good for these reasons, this person's bad for these reasons, and then people could use the shows to go ahead and pick the candidates that they wanted and listen to the interview and or maybe find the most interesting interviews. Where it fell apart is when you had everybody agreeing about something and everybody agreeing that's like somebody's a horrible person or maybe somebody's a good person. That's when it really fell apart.
Because
I tend to agree with Nosy Gamer there. It was the analysis shows were better when there was a diversity of opinion.
because it would ramp, you guys would ramp each other up, and it would keep going down and down. But I think there was stuff that for me, it was the stuff that was like not, there was no pressure put on it. And the first thing was when you guys asked if Jane would endorse Gorski to run again, and because he was actually on the panel, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, he's very professional, and he gets down to business," and
Oh,
that
that's
may
right.
be true. But these guys were like this; they were good friends. So I thought it was like, "Hey, somebody stop him! He's just completely not recused himself from that relationship at all. He hasn't said, yeah, well, I'm good friends with him, so this might be biased." It was more like, yeah, he's great. I endorse him fully. He's totally professional, totally reversing a lot of the damage that had been done from these leaks. So I felt like he was being very manipulative in that respect, and I was offended for the audience at that point. Um, but it is interesting because you did not just pan people; you gave people great reviews. Somebody challenged me saying, "Well, do these interviews really help at all?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." I changed my entire vote based on an interview that was done with the guy from Red Frog. After hearing him, I said, "That's the guy that
Mm,
thinks like I do," and I changed my vote over to him. So I think they were meaningful. They were great content for the season because it felt more festive, and and I was not necessarily a fan of them before, but looking back on it, I realized you guys did a ton of work, um, especially Noisy, who did a lot of research, and you guys provided some entertainment for the guys that get to be on the council or the panel and talk about candidates. That's a lot of fun. And, at the end of
yeah,
the
I mean,
day, you're having fun with it.
Yeah, and
let's put
it's just not like people doing research. It's like people like Bach who for one interview had to do the interview from a closet. Um,
Yeah,
it's
like
like
Bach jeopardizing his marriage like on multiple occasions during the entire process just by like interviewing or being an editor. Like that man deserves like the highest of shout outs and praises.
or
That's
like Stupid
awesome.
man,
Genius. Stupid Genius was like wonderful. I mean he was doing it before I got on there. He would come up with stuff. I was like, where in the world did you get that? So yeah, Stupid Genius was great too. And the guys that were actually doing the editing of those things, they put in some crazy hours.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it wasn't just the team that were doing the interviews or the team that was doing the analysis shows. It was the editors, it was the researchers, and things like that. Because how many people did you have actually on the team last year doing that stuff?
Last year was probably the most amount of people that we had working on the project. So it was the core of Cap Stable guys, and then Lank invited a whole bunch of other people. Gosh, I'd have to look at the Slack server, but at least a dozen different folks in one capacity or another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So never have it been said. I'm
Well,
getting interjected.
and on the record, I was a critic of the process last year, the year before, um, and I'm not taking it back because I think everything I said was legitimate at the time, but I do have a second view of it, and I think it's kind of like your dog's a nuisance, until it's gone, and then you're like, "Where's my dog?" Not that you guys are dogs, but that familiarity, the thing you took for granted, yeah, all that is missing this year. I thought of filling in. I put out, and doing some interviews. I put out a little um, weather balloon and asked Twitter followers of this program if they thought I should do it. 80% said, "Yeah, do the interviews." So I think there is demand for it. It's not
Yeah,
normally a
totally.
a big hit generator for, it doesn't the content. As you can see, our crowd is only over 200. Yes, we did FCs, it was over 400. It's not that there's the reward in itself for doing it. It's not there. It's not like we're getting to be a part of something that we know is going to be super successful, like Sweeps Week or something. This is this is something that's not as successful as other parts of the game to cover and stuff, but people still cover it because it's fine, kind of fun. And I
And
did,
this is always the big battle, isn't it? With CSM. It's like
yeah,
CSM. They're people that they can't tell CCP what to do. They can't tell CCP what sausage to make, but at least they can kind of give them some ideas on what ingredients go into it. And it may not seem like an important thing, but to a lot of people, but it is. And the a lot of this information, it gets put out there. It gets put on the forums. It gets put out on blogs and things like that. But if you don't, but not everybody goes and reads them. Nobody has the time to sit there and read blogs. But some people have the time to listen to interviews or whatever format they do. And I think losing such a big thing has left a great big hole in the people that maybe just want to go and listen to it on their daily commute, and to help raise that exposure a little bit further.
So I will say, and this is all really humbling, and thank you. for saying that the interviews were important to you. That means quite a bit. But anyone who is thinking about doing interviews or who wants to do CSM interviews, I like do it. Like when we started out, like I'm just a normal dude with a really big beard and someone that needs a haircut. Um, like a, there's nothing like special required of you except maybe putting in the work to get everything kind of presented and polished enough. And if you're someone that you think you want to start like interviewing CSM candidates and publishing that, like go for it. It's real fun and it's real great, and you'll sink a lot of hours into it and you'll make a lot of memories.
Yeah, but you're coming at it from like more the merrier. You weren't competitive about the
Gosh.
space, saying, "Hey, that's
Oh,
our gig." Yeah,
no, no, gosh,
yeah,
yeah. The more doing this, and the more talking about CSM, and the more that are involved in this process, the better. Kind of was how I always thought of it.
yeah. And there are people who are going to do interviews. I haven't actually decided. Maybe I'll announce before the show is over. But I know that Apotheny, who ran for CSM last year, may do some interviews. There may be interviews coming from. There was another group. I'm going to kick myself after the show for not remembering. But there are definitely people who want to do some. Sorry, that's it. Event will do some, right? Tiberius?
Yep, we
Will it
will be.
be? Will it be
We're
you?
going to
Excellent.
hold some panel shows with some of the CSM guys as well. We're going to
And
be putting those out on Twitch.
And I
Yeah.
don't know if we maybe want to start talking about current candidates, the current batch that are up, but there is this wonderful resource that I know is updated on a regular basis by a certain nosy gamer called CSM Wire. That when there are interviews from any outlet, they will absolutely be on CSM Wire. So you should certainly check that out.
So that'll be
Good.
a,
I'll have a word with Nosy about that later.
Yeah, and anybody out there that's doing interviews, get in touch with me, and I will make sure that it gets posted up there. I think I'm behind on what some of the stuff that the Mind Clash podcast, who's another one that's doing this stuff.
right.
Give them a shout out. Yeah, so I got to put a couple of their stuff on there. But yeah,
Ooh,
I
I
think
don't know about them.
Alex is from Noir. What's that show called? He has done some in the past.
Declarations of
Declaration of
War.
War.
Yeah, they've done panels and interviews in the past too, absolutely.
Right. So there are ways to get exposure. Open Comms has done some stuff already, and there are definitely ways and places for people who want to run for CSM to get their voice out and stuff. But in the last few minutes, I guess we have about 15 more minutes. Noisy, do you want to take us through some of the candidates? And we're going to do this again. It's not the right time to do this. That's why we talked about the institution. We're going to do this again in about a couple of weeks. Hopefully, have the same guests, and we're going to go through each candidate and talk to them. It's not going to be a panel where we say they're good or bad, but we're going to talk about who they are, and we'll also we'll put them into context, like what does their area of expertise kind of mean? Where is the game at this point? Do those match, etc. We may do other things. Haven't really decided yet, but maybe we should talk about some of the guys that are kind of highlights of this year. And Noisy, you probably are most familiar with who's running, right?
yeah. It actually, and this is like maybe the biggest change to the CSM running, is that it seems that there's a lot of third-party developers that are running this year. I think the guys that I'm thinking of as the biggest one is Calbior Skirate from Pandemic Horde. He's somebody that's been involved in their new player uh, uh, onboarding process, and he's written a whole bunch of tools for Pandemic Horde in order for them to be able to handle the amount of people that they do. That he was the one that impressed me on the third party dev front, just because I saw a couple things on Reddit and him getting shout outs from Gobbins, I think it was, about how good he was. And he was so good, they made him a director. So this year, it's not just Steve that is a third party dev. There's a couple of guys, but he's the guy that really stood out to me.
So you don't think Steve has that corner like anymore, like necessarily to himself anymore?
Nah, he doesn't have it to himself.
Because Steve's
Oh,
running for the fourth time, right?
He's running for the fourth time, yes.
Noisy, you were saying? Yeah.
yeah. I was going to go to the next guy, and I can't remember
Sure.
his
Sorry. Go
name.
ahead.
There is a guy, and he is running from Eve University, and this will be the first guy who's run from Eve University since they went to the single transferable vote. When they went to STV, it kind of like, I mean, Eve Uni always was big enough to get a candidate on. Once they went to STV, they weren't, and I don't even think they tried.
Yeah. I've heard rumblings of HiSec putting together a ballot to distribute and to act as their own coalition since
I'd
they've always
love it.
been spread out. Yeah.
Absolutely love it. Because since Mike Azariah, there hasn't really been. I mean, you can argue Steve Finucane is a high-sec candidate, but since Mike Azariah, there hasn't been like a dedicated high-sec candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna call out a guy from that I think was getting better every year that he ran. The guy's name is Commander Oz.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of high sec candidates, I think he's an industry high sec guy. But this is his, gosh, it must be his third or maybe fourth time running.
Yeah, and he threw in a twist this year because you know how like you always want to see a candidate growing. If they run and then they run again, you want to see that growth in that candidate. And this year he put the twist in where he wound up in a C2, and he's actually got alphas in the C2 with him doing wormhole content. And since alphas can't have cloaks, that's a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
C2 is a class of wormhole. There's C through 1 through 6. And so he's in a more or less less dangerous on 2 out of 6 scale. With alphas who are, or alpacas, as I like to call them, everybody does, um, who are not able to not able to use all the skills that are kind of required to live in such a dangerous place. So this is kind of it's taking the scouts to the mountains kind of thing. It's
Yeah,
kind of neat.
and that's something that like you would find out of like Signal Cartel doing that kind of thing. You can see Johnny Splunk on his Twitch channel. You can see him doing that, you know, taking alpha characters or running his alpha character and doing content in wormholes. But actually like going in there and doing PvP, which Signal Cartel doesn't do. Yeah, that's kind of thinking outside the box.
Right. Who else you got?
Oh.
So many.
I think the big names, so just to list off a bunch of people right away, Vince Draken from NC Dot has thrown his hat in the ring. Killer
Right.
B of Pandemic Legion fame.
There's a
has-
difference, though. Let me stop you between
Sure.
Draken and Killer B, and that
Oh,
is
yeah.
Killer B is insanely popular because of recent events. And Vince Draken has been
Vince is
around,
popular and has been around forever.
yeah,
Absolutely.
for a
Oh, yeah.
long time.
Mm,
He's not as visible
yeah,
at this time, but he's definitely been a heavyweight in nullsec politics for,
he's been playing since beta as well. You know,
yeah.
Yep.
he's certainly
Yeah.
the
Absolutely.
oldest running player that's on CSM at the moment.
I see Sort Dragon has thrown his hat in the ring. Again, he was a
Another
Yeah,
former
very, yeah.
yeah,
CSM member.
yeah. Apparently, he runs every year in which the CSM ends in an even digit.
Even years. Yeah.
He was a former CSM, right? And there was some
Mhm.
controversy around his performance, that he influenced the wormhole generating reliability to get from nullsec to nullsec, which he said, yeah, it's too much, and CCP concurred on their own, probably, and kind of said, yeah, we'll have less nullsec to nullsec, which meant that Pandemic Legion, that was often attacking him, um, had less chance to get over to their space. So it was a defensive move using the CSM and CCP as the way the narrative went. Whether it was true or not, who knows?
Yeah, there was that Reddit thread was around the end of CSM 10. It must have
Mm,
been. Yeah.
And I'm going to talk about just briefly about a guy who has not posted a thread, but apparently he's running. That would be Noobman. I heard last night on the Open Com show
Hmm.
that he was not going to do the groveling for votes this year. He was just going to go out and say what he did. Although he hasn't posted on the Eve forums I'm thinking that he's a shoe-in anyway because of the wormhole block, and everybody has been really happy with the job he did as a representative of wormhole space. So, and also he's from Hard Knocks, which is like the king of wormholes, from what I understand.
Mhm.
So he's acting like a block candidate that doesn't have to worry. Like he's acting like he's on the #1 spot of the Goon Swarm ballot.
Oh, I see. So he's running on his he's running on his voting record, but we don't really know what his voting record is. But we assume that he made the case for wormhole and said as much that that's what his focus was. That's where he spoke up. That's the kind of thing he focused on. But I think some of the changes that he was asking for inadvertently would enhance his side's ability to generate money inside of wormholes, I think. And that's not saying there's anything controversial about that, because that may be what a lot of people wanted that are in wormholes, is to make it more lucrative, considering the amount of mining that's happening in nullsec and the amount of money being generated outside of nullsec. Wormholes
Totally.
are more dangerous. They should make more money, is that sort of thing. But yeah, and and then I guess so. Of the incumbents, the judge is trying to come back. Bobman's trying to come back. I believe
Jintan.
Yintan. Yeah, Yintan's going to run again. Zanuria wants to run again. Whether he'll be on the goon ballot, which would help him tremendously, I'm not sure
I'm
yet.
gonna eat some crow about Zenuria.
No,
By
don't eat
all,
crow. Don't
don't eat
eat crow.
crow. Never
No,
eat crow.
no, no,
Okay.
no. I like Zanuria. I give him high marks. But I know what you're going to say. You thought he was awful. He wasn't awful.
Well, you no, yeah, he
Okay.
like by all accounts, A for effort, and as like just hearing that he was one of the more active members of CSM and contributed quite a bit. I'm really happy that I was proven wrong in that regard.
Yeah, I think I'm quite happy that I got proven wrong in that going hard as well, because I'm kind of ashamed to admit it as well, that I build up this
Don't eat crow.
perception. I mean, I'm going to eat crow. I don't
Okay,
care.
okay. It's your food.
Exactly. I built up this perception of Zanuria, admittedly, that was kind of based on what people thought. And yeah, he's a bit quirky. He's a bit of a weird guy. But from what I've heard about his contribution to this year's CSM, it has been crazy. Like the stuff, not crazy as in mental, but crazy as in he has put in a lot of effort. He always comes to every single topic, razor focused, and
He took it seriously.
he took it seriously,
I
and I
think like that's
appreciate
the minimum, right? Like that
Yeah,
should be
yeah.
the minimum.
Whether
But
I agree with what he was trying to do or do not, we don't know, because it's all NDA'd and nobody ever tells us. But I appreciate the effort, at least.
what bothers me is when everybody was saying, and maybe I have a bad habit of doing this, when everybody was saying, Soneria, oh my God, it's a poison pill put in by Goon Swarm because they couldn't have Scion, so they're saying a big FU to CCP. When everybody was saying that, and I was saying that earlier too, then I found out some things, about Zanuria, and I was like, you know what? It's not. He's going to be good. You'll see. Even Lilu was saying he'll probably be fine. He'll probably be great. But I think the lowering of expectations to that level, where everybody thought he's going to be a disaster, and then he shows up and actually just does fine.
He did the work. He
Yeah,
put
he did the
work.
work.
Maybe in
But it's
some way
not.
that's like a grand strategy, right?
Maybe, but I mean, then he would be brilliant. But I don't think that's the case.
Right, absolutely.
I'll tell this little story. I was in Vegas talking to CCP Quant, and we were talking about statistics, and we were talking about marketing and how excited he was about this. He was going to be able to put a site together that would have like not only the statistical market influxes, but what was maneuvering the mega site to spike at a certain time, so that people would understand how the economy is tied into the actual world. And so we were talking about that. It's really interesting stuff. And Zonario walks up, stands between us, and says, "Can you quantify how many times people say my name?" And Quant looked at him and said, "You mean in the game?" And he goes, "No, like anywhere in the in the manosphere." And it's like, okay, well, if he's joking, that's kind of funny. If he's not joking, my God, just interrupted a really cool conversation.
There's a story for the life of me I'm trying to remember that Nash told me that Zanuria said to the art department, and I can't remember what it is now.
Well, there's many stories, and that's fine. But he was seen the year before that, when he didn't make it, as the candidate to get behind. That was kind of a troll candidate, and we have a few more troll candidates this year as well. And troll candidates are basically people who are just fan favorites, but they're kind of disruptive to this. They're basically anti-establishment or uh, irreverent players that become fan favorites, and then so they get pushed in. I would like an Arnold Schwarzenegger candidacy or a Trump candidacy. They're very insurgent kind of candidacies. Do you guys know who those guys are?
Well,
There's
I don't know about if he's popular, but there's a guy. He's running this year under an alt name Junior McBlazing.
that's Aram.
That's Aram.
Yeah,
That's a definite troll candidate. His thing is putting stuff into the online store, in the in-game store. That's his troll.
Yeah, Cloud, our producer, saying Darius was a troll candidate. Darius. Darius 3, actually, not Darius Johnson, but Darius 3, who actually I think got thrown out a long time ago.
No, that's interesting because there's another guy that's been accused of being a troll candidate, and that's Thermal Damage.
That's not an accusation. That's a fact. And quite frankly, if CCP goes through the stuff and goes through his Twitter feed, they won't let him run. He is very anti-homosexual. He has called them mentally defective. So yeah, I'm thinking that if they do that level of background, they may not let him run.
Yeah.
Rodin here, who's also a candidate for CSM and my sympathetic favorite, says that there is one alpha candidate running, and that's kind of interesting because alphas can run, but they can't vote. So do you know if they have more than one, or is that? That's first I've heard there's an alpha actually running. An alpha is somebody who doesn't have.
I'm going to confess here, I haven't researched all the 59 candidates that have announced yet.
It's too early.
The ones I know.
It's too early, and that's why we're not going too deep into it, and that's why I left it for the last part of the show. When we're about to vote, we'll go down the candidate and tick them off, something like this, but with the information. We'll try to be like as unbiased as possible, but we're also not going to flinch. These guys have records of behavior in the game. They have records of interest in the game, and we're going to bring as much of that to you as possible so that you can say, do what happened to me, and that is to change my vote because I found somebody that made a lot of sense to me. I like the way he thought, and I like the way he presented himself. I wish that guy were running again. If he is, I'll be sure to highlight him. There's definitely other candidates that deserve recognition. One I want to turn to because it kind of I'm always going against the grain. Is Steve Mnuchin, that everybody says, yeah, that's like the guy I want to run with. Like they'd ask that question, you guys CSM Watch would say, who would you want to be partners with? And everybody would say Steve Mnuchin. I just thought that's like saying I like soda or I like pop or
oh gosh, like that became the safe answer in all honesty, and yeah, like everyone loves Steve Mnuchin, but that was really the safe answer. That if you wanted it out, you would just say, "Oh, I run with Fuzzy Steve; it'll be fine, right?"
Well, Fuzzy Steve makes amazing tools for the community in his Fuzzworks, and I'm sure he's generally a nice guy and stuff like that. But and he usually represents a third party section. And I don't know. There's a lot of safe
one thing I've always, in my interactions with Steve Mnuchin anyway, because I've written a few articles where I've sought his input, certainly with Crest API stuff and things like that. I've just found him so immensely approachable. Like I literally can just go, "Hey, Steve, what's going on with this? Tell me blah 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 blah." And he goes, "Well, I can't tell you about that because it's NDA, but I can tell you this."
Well, I disagree with you there. Great. Because I think we've approached him a couple times to be a guest, and he's like, "Oh, I won't be on any show that Matani's a part of." And I just thought, and then when we invite him, he makes it public that we invited him. Not me necessarily, but a different show, or somebody invited him to be a part of an interview. And I just thought, like, if you're making a point to say I turned these people down, then you're saying something political, and you're saying you're an anti-goon kind of person. I think.
But there's a reason for that, though.
What was the reason? Because there was something. Why don't you tell us?
I don't know. I can't remember now. But I do remember off the top of my head is why there was a bit of an issue, and I think there was a period of time where the Imperium actually went after him for some reason, and I can't remember. I might be totally wrong, and I'm just pulling it from the back of my brain here, but apparently the Imperium did go after him for some reason.
Do you know what it was?
Yeah, what happened is the Imperium decided to say that Steve Renokin was a puppet of Endy's.
There we go.
Oh, because he had
That's
agreed
the
with a
one.
statement. Yeah.
Well,
Well,
so then after that, it was like, yeah, okay, screw you guys.
right. So,
which is understandable.
yeah, it is understandable to turn. It is understandable to turn people down, but to make it public is to make a political, statement. So, I think you have to live by that. No, I think you have to live by that. I live by it, and so should everybody else. That's a good way to put it. But I think that's a good way to put it.
Hey, this is what I get paid, and I should get you. Everybody else should be paid that as well.
Right. So I'm not necessarily saying that Steve is a good or bad candidate, but he's not an unpolitical candidate, and he is a safe choice. But you should also know that he has a mind of his own, and it's. I don't think he is above politics. That's what I'm saying.
No. None of us are above politics.
Yeah.
Politics is
that's one universal truth about
that. I think that you can't, even in this kind of pseudo journalism thing that we do, some more than others, because Nosey's an amazing guy that looks up amazing stuff. But you cannot be not passionate about the things that you're spending time looking into. And so, yeah, we're going to be political too. We just try to be try to give as many points of view as possible, even ones you disagree with. And then you're providing the space for the debate. But that doesn't mean that you don't have a point of view about it. I feel certain things for certain topics that I talk about, but I can still let in the topic that I disagree with and give it as much space and challenge it and have it challenge me. And I've had my mind changed many times. CSM Watch is actually one of them, where I was politically, I thought it was a bad idea, and I thought it was, but as I've talked with them and seen what they did and what their actual motives were and everything, it's just like everything else. Whoever you're fighting in the game isn't the person you're fighting in real life. In real life, you're in the same tribe, on the same team, playing the same game.
Well, the motives are for the Cap Stable interviews, the CSM Watch interviews were totally benign. It was just that, like you said, we were all influenced by the politics, and it was just a few of those people that stepped over the line on the politics. That was it. There was no other reason behind it.
The troll candidates, I mean, Aram, the guy that we were just talking about, is somebody who's, and we've given him some airtime now, so I guess in some way we're giving him what he needs, exposure. But it was basically part of what is it? Something of non-aligned worlds or something, Elna, which is now in Snuffbox. They were actually a part of Nully, and they kind of brought this really ugly culture to the place. But they were, active, so they were given a lot of leeway. And but they kind of ruined the place. They destroyed the training alliance. They destroyed the renting empire, and all that stuff right when the Fountain War started, which really sidelined Nully pretty bad. And so, yeah. And did they apologize? Did they run away? And no, they totally owned it and said, "Yeah, we did this to you. Screw you guys, et cetera, et cetera." And so that's But who knows? He might be an actual player that cares about the game and that sort of stuff. So.
And
Well,
we
you
should
never
add
know.
we should add that he did run in CSM 9 and didn't win.
And you never know, it might turn out to be another scenario where we all think they're wrong, and then they turn out to be right. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then, but there's, like I said, there's people who are fan favorites for different reasons, and if they get on, they kind of just waste an opportunity. And now there's only 10 opportunities to really, have good feedback from people. You got to take those, each and every one of those positions, seriously. Not only did you have a good CSM that did a lot of work, but you now have a lot of good candidates, and it's going to be very tough to get in there. One last person to bring up is Roden, who's been tirelessly working the rounds, trying to get some airtime here and there. We're not going to give him any, but today. But you guys know him. Is he from CSM Watch, or is he from Cap Stable?
He was Neocom.
Yeah, right.
Which is now part of Eventi. So there you go.
Because they merged in with you, right?
Yep.
Or threw their support your way.
Well, no, they've merged into us. So all the people that worked on the Neocom now work over at EVNT. Roden is writing a CSM diary, a CSM candidate diary on the EVNT site, which we're publishing every week. And he sort of. And it's the same. To be honest, I'll throw this out to every other CSM candidate as well. If you want to write a diary or you want to write something for a platform, and want it to go to a neutral group that isn't affiliated to anybody particular, then let me know. I'm quite happy to do that. But Roden at the moment is writing a CSM diary, so you can follow sort of what he's been up to and where he answers some questions that are directed at him and directed back. And, for me, particularly, I might be a bit biased because I am a writer as well, and I'm involved in the media. A CSM member who writes regularly is an important thing for me, because it's the communication with the player base. Even if it's just a, hey, we're thinking about this. This is da 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 da. What are your thoughts on it? Whatever, that's an important thing for me.
Yeah.
So
I think you could lobby. One of the big criticisms of the current CSM is they have not been as vocal and communicative as some prior CSMs.
no,
Yeah.
I mean,
With a couple, yeah.
Jintan publishes stuff on a regular basis,
Yep.
which we've copied again on EVNT. But
And even the most
You're right.
vocal CSM guy wasn't on CSM. That was Apotheny, who was putting out communications. Now working with Yintan, so the both of them together, I guess. But he wasn't even on it. Last thoughts on this.
he got elected. He would have been elected last year, but he unfortunately, because of his personal circumstances, he couldn't be on last year, so he gave up his place.
Last
Yeah,
thoughts on this section, Nosy?
Yeah. Oh, and then since Apotheny had to withdraw, that actually meant that Erica Mizuni also was knocked off the CSM. She had won. She would win with Apotheny on the CSM, but she lost when he had to withdraw.
Oh, actually, that's a pertinent reminder because I really did want to talk about Erica Mizuni just slightly on the platform that she runs, because it's one of the unique platforms for Eve, which is accessibility as well. Like, easy accessibility, and we don't have enough people doing that on the CSM.
Not to cut you off, but I'm going to cut you off. We can pick up where we left off with candidates. Actually, now we'll start over and talk about different candidates next time. Not next time, but maybe right before elections. What date would that be? Elections are the 3rd, so whatever the Saturday is before that. We'll go through the candidates list and do our own, contextualizing them. And if you feel it's biased, get behind a microphone and build up a show and do the same thing on the other side or something. But we're gonna go ahead and do it because it actually is important. Like I said, it changed my mind, gave me a lot of content when I was going to the gym back then, and I appreciate all the work CSM Watch did. And it won't be necessarily straight interviews, but it will be something of a CSM show. I've not done these, never written articles about it, except to criticize CSM every once in a while, but this will be the first time we dive into that. Let's move on to announcements and then close up the show. Tiberius.
So we have a bunch of player meets coming up in the next couple of weeks. We have EVNT London. It's at the usual place, the Weatherspoons in Tower Hamlets. That's on the 18th of Feb. It kicks off at 11 a.m. It will go on until nerds decide they can't drink anymore. Then we have Eve Stuttgart in Germany on the 19th of Feb, also kicking off at 6 p.m. On that day as well. We have the Minnesota meet in Egan. I'm probably pronouncing that completely wrong. That's on the 24th Feb from 4 p.m. And Houston's getting together again for their monthly meet on the 25th of Feb, starting from 8 p.m. as well. And last but not least, I think we have kicking off tomorrow is the first weekend of the EVNT Championship Majors League, and that will be on after the 07 show, which will be on at what time? Anybody? Too bad.
The 07 show is at 20 UTC.
So, excellent.
Yeah.
There you go.
Awesome. And we're kind of just throwing this idea out, but Dunk from Brave and myself are thinking of trying to find a way to do a proper Eve meet in Los Angeles. The one that's currently happening is by Lank and Space Pope, and it happens in Pasadena, which is great. But we're thinking one that's a little closer to the west side of LA. So maybe something by the ocean. If you're in the area, let us know if that's something you would be interested in. Then I'll actually put some work into it. Thanks for those announcements.
Don't ask if people are interested in it.
It just never happened, right? Yeah.
Just do it. If you ask people whether or not they'll come, they won't come. But if you just do it, they will come. If you build it, they will come.
Words of wisdom. If I rent it, how about if I rent the space? It's kind of expensive over here. All right. Thanks very much. Well, it's time to wrap up the show. We just have some last minute stuff. I wanted to remind you that when you're watching a show on the Imperium News Twitch, that you need to hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, hit the donation button as much as possible for these guys that work really hard for you. All from now until a week from now. If you're watching a show, make sure that you participate in some way and give those guys some sign that you guys are appreciating what they do. That includes us as well. For my podcast, where I actually package this up and put it out on a different server, I've created a Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/Matarol. And we appreciate the incredible progression that we've had from a few dollars to many dollars. And just as a sign to us that we're doing good stuff, and we really appreciate it. It helps pay for expenses that were incurred earlier and all the kind of little costs that come and go.
Which are a lot of money, by the way.
Yeah. And you're paying for my retirement, and I won't be sarcastic like Masani is.
Your multi-dollar empire, right?
Yeah, exactly. If I could buy seeds for cabbage, then yes, you would be paying for my if I ate cabbage the rest of my life. But yeah, so thanks very much though for showing support.
It's a great poor man. He has to eat cabbage. That's what the podcast makes him so poor. He has to eat cabbage. There you go. How can you deal with that?
I want to thank our guests, Hoots. Anybody you want to say hi to or anything?
You know what? Excuse me. Oh, that's why I have water. No, thanks so much for having me on. It's been an absolute blast. Lantheris, I know you're out there, and good luck, buddy, in grad school. We miss you. Come back soon.
I like Lank. We're both Morrissey fans, which is kind of funny. Noisy Gamer?
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody, if you are going to apply to run for CSM, you have until Friday to do so. The candidates get announced on the 28th, and voting starts on March 6th and ends on March 26th. So that's the CSM schedule, and that's part of the reason why you don't hear about us talking about everybody, because right now there's 46 candidates who have announced on the forums, not including CSM members who are going to announce later.
And Tiberius?
I don't have any shares this week.
If you don't like anybody, it's fine.
No, you're all bastards. As far as I said, no. I guess I'm going to give a shout out again to the EVNT team again, because we're running the championship tournament at the moment. The guys in there, there's like 40 guys putting in all the work to get the streams and the tournaments together, and it amazes me every single time they put a show together every week. Just looking at the stream of information that's bouncing back in the channels just amazes me. I love their dedication. So, please show the support. Go check out the tournament, the Major League tournament that's happening after the 07 show, because they put a lot of effort into it, and your support, as always, will be very much appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, thank you guys for showing up. We really appreciate it. You guys are the content of the show, and it shows. That's why people like it. In fact, I just got an email from Lord Mulder from Rooks and Kings. I probably said his name wrong. Who said, he likes the show. He's amazed at the guests we get. The content's great, and he'll be on at some point soon. So those of you who want to know what Rooks and Kings have been up to, we'll find out soon.
Nice.
Until then, thank you very much for showing up, the crowd, and you guys who are on the panel here. And we will see you again next week. That's all for Talking in Stations. Enjoy your week and stay tuned for great programming with Meta Show on Undead Zone and stuff like that. All right. Thanks. We'll see you next time. That's it for Talking in Stations.
Kokina semdol ka ke mo fa seda.